Hi guitarlings, I'm Gray and this is Hub Guitar. Today we're going to study a blues classic by Freddie King called Sad Nite Owl. So I like this tune for beginners that want to study the blues because it goes at a nice and slow tempo. It's got a pretty logical and sensible melody that you can learn along with it. And like most blues, it's going to use the standard 12-bar blues chord progression, so you can study a lot of accompaniment patterns that will go with this tune, but then later you can repurpose them and play them with just about any blues. So I've moved this song into the key of E to make it a little bit more beginner friendly so that you can play along with some basic open chords. Today we're going to learn the melody, then we're going to learn some chords, and finally we're going to talk about improvisation. So let's get to it. Now the melody for Sad Nite Owl starts off with an open G string going to the first fret of that same string to the second fret of the B string and then open B string. And you've got this little motif. And that's meant to be played over the E7 chord. Note that the first few notes of the melody are pickup notes, which means that they come before the downbeat of the chord. So before the song even starts, you've got a couple notes. And then the chord comes there on the last note, so pay attention to that. This little melodic fragment fits perfectly on the E chord, and then what happens for the A chord is that melody is actually kind of repeated, but the notes of it are changed. They're shifted up to fit onto the A chord. So if you just move up to the 5th fret of the 3rd string and do the very same thing, which is 5-6 on the 3rd string, and then 7-5 on the 2nd string, you'll see that that's every single note of the original motif, but plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets. And you've got the identical melodic fragment, but it fits over the A chord now. And this melodic fragment does show up again later on in the tune, and this time it's going to start from the 7th fret so that we can play it along with the B7 chord. So if you consider that most of the tune is just this little melody fragment going up these 2 strings and practice those up and down, that's going to help you get this melody under your fingers that much quicker. The other part of this melody is a longer bit, and this longer bit occurs a couple times when there are 2 E7 chords directly next to each other because it's a 2-measure melodic fragment, so it needs those 2 E chords. And it starts on the 3rd fret of the 1st string and then goes up to the 4th fret before it goes to the 5th fret of the 2nd string, 4th fret of the 3rd string, 3rd fret of the 2nd string, 2nd fret of the 2nd string, open 2nd string, and then it goes to this little chromatic line starting on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, 1st fret, open string, and then 4th fret of the 4th string. So all together that sounds like this. Pretty bluesy. So practice that melodic fragment a lot of times, over and over again, and then practice the other little melodic fragments, and you'll find that the entire melody to Sad Nite Owl consists just of adding together these 2 little melody fragments. So here's the melody. So that's it to the melody. It's a 12/8 kind of feeling, so it's like each quarter note is divided into 3 beats. You can kind of count it as 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. And if you tap out those 8th note beats, I think it'll be easier for you to hear the melody. So tap out, listen along with the melody, and tap along and see if you can find that subdivision of the 8th note and kind of tap da 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 da. So that's the strategy I use to figure out rhythms, and I recommend it. Next up, we're going to talk about the chords. So we can play the entire thing with just 3 open chords. We've got our open E7, that's 0, 2, 0, 1, 0, 0. Now because this has a lot of open strings, it can sound a little bit muddy, dirty, so you can play around with different accompaniment patterns to give it a better and less muddy texture. If you just kind of wail away on it, yeah, it's going to sound a little bit quacky and funny. But having said that, if you're a beginner approaching this tune, I recommend you just kind of do straight quarter notes. It's okay, it'll sound a little sloppy, but that's cool. So we've got E7, and then we're going to have an open A7. So that's nothing on the 6th string, and then open 5th, 2, open, 2, open. And when we strum that, we have to avoid the 6th string, otherwise it's going to sound even more muddy and sloppy. And then we've got the B7, so that's nothing on the 6th string, and then 2, 1, 2. You're going to use your index finger to get that 1st fret of the 4th string. And then you're going to put your pinky on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. So you've got this B7 chord. And I recommend that when you're beginning learning this accompaniment in the blues, you just go ahead and strum through, maybe even just what I call block chords. So that's each chord gets played one time. So you play E7, 2, 3, 4, A7, 2, 3, 4, E7, 2, 3, 4. Your first job as an accompanist is to get the chord where it belongs at the right time. So I wouldn't worry too much about flailing around with your right hand until you can do that and keep up with those chord switches. Once you've got that down, maybe you can spice it up a little bit and turn those into quarter notes. And then once you've got that down, maybe some other rhythms will start to suggest themselves. Maybe you'll hear, kind of in your head some other ideas, and you can play around with those as well. So that's the basic accompaniment using the chords. There's also a sort of bass-driven accompaniment pattern that we're going to go into. And it consists basically of, in a similar way to the melody, 3 little fragments that fit and correspond to a specific chord. So let's go into that. We've got this. This is for the E7 chord. So open 6th string, 2nd fret of the 4th string, open 4th string, and 2nd fret of the 5th string. And that's played at 2 notes each. Note that we've got a shuffle rhythm here, so you're not going to play this like a classical tune. You're going to play this like a blues. So every pair of notes, you can consider that the first of the pair is longer than the second of the pair. So we have da, 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 da. And that comes from the underlying feeling of triplets. So if I pronounce out the triplets, I'm going to have da, 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 etc. So that's where we get that shuffle feeling. It's from a triplet, where the first note is 2 of the triplet notes, and the second note is the third of the 3. So it's da 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 da. So here's the first pattern, and then we repeat that for the A7 chord. We just move everything down 1 string. No problem. We go back. And then I have an optional thing here. You can sort of repeat the E chord pattern, or you can do this chromatic idea. 0, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to go to A. Another A. Back to E. And then we've got a B pattern. So the B pattern is the same as the A pattern, but everything is up 2 frets. So open becomes 2. 2 becomes 4, open becomes 2 again, and 2 becomes 4. So it's the same as the A pattern, but everything is lifted up 2 frets. Now that happens 1 out of 12 times, which will make it feel disproportionately difficult. So sit there and do it a few times until you get used to it. Don't waste all your practice on the easy stuff. Isolate the things that are going to give you trouble and do more of those things. Now we're going to talk about improvisation. At the most basic level, the blues improvisation is going to be based on a corresponding minor pentatonic scale to the key. So this is in the key of E, which means we'll come up here to the 12th fret, and we'll play an E minor pentatonic scale. This is by far the most common way to get started improvising with the blues, so really make sure you know that scale up and down and all around, because you can use that as the source for your improvisational ideas. You can sometimes add the blues note, which is in between the 4 and the 5 of the pentatonic scale. So 1, 1, flat 3, 4, sharp 4, 5. And that blues note works pretty much on every chord. At the more advanced level, you can also start to mimic the melody. What the melody does is it adds in some of the notes that are inside of the passing chord, but maybe not in this scale. And that's what makes the melody sound kind of cool, is it follows along with the chords. But for now, I recommend you just stick with your minor pentatonic, and maybe you're adding that blues note in as well. If you're just starting out, you'll want to come up with a few basic blues licks that you can play along with this track. And the cool thing about the blues is that any lick or idea that you learn in one blues is probably going to transplant right over to another blues. So it's a little bit beyond the scope of this lesson to show you a lot of different blues licks or maybe do a whole solo. But if you check out some of the lessons on YouTube that can have various licks for the minor pentatonic, you could study a few of those and try throwing them in with your improvisation. We're just going to do 1 or 2 here so that you can get a general idea of how it's done. My favorite blues lick when I was starting out was to take the note below the blues note and bend it up to that blues note and come back down and then walk down the pentatonic scale. So something like this. So an interesting thing happens in the blues where it's, instead of there being a sort of correct and incorrect note, it's almost like a whole range of pitches between this note and this note are all sort of legitimate. So you can play this note on the 14th fret of the 3rd string, bend it up, bend it back down, and go to the 12th fret, and then go to the 14th fret of the 4th string. And that's going to sound good on every chord. You can mix in some little pentatonic stuff. Another pentatonic lick that I like to do starts on the 12th fret of the 5th string, and then you do a little hammer-on to 13 and pull off. So, and then we go to the 15th fret of the big string to the 12th fret, and then the 14th fret of the 4th string. So it's like this. And you can mix that with this one. And you can throw in some pentatonic notes. So just 2 or 3 strong blues licks will work over every single chord in this thing and give you a kind of a launching point into developing your own solo. And that all stems from really knowing the scale, not just being able to play up and down, but being able to play it in up and down and left and right and sideways and really having mastery over that scale. That's how the ideas are going to flow from your fingers when your fingers feel like they can basically do anything that they might have to do with that scale. So play along with the backing track. I hope you'll play the melody and the chords and do a little bit of improv along with the backing track and get your first blues tune under your belt. So that's it for this lesson. The blues is a great style to learn a little bit of improvisation on because the chords are always the same, and most musicians that I can think of can do a little bit of the blues. So it's sort of become a common language that many musicians can speak at least a little bit of. And so if you can do a blues tune, it'll give you something to play when you meet up with your other musician friends, and it'll make you feel like you've got something to participate in whenever a blues is going on. So that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.